Today we're going to talk about Prom Night, the 1980 Canadian slasher film directed by Paul Lynch, written by William Gray, and starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Leslie Nielsen. Prom Night is a 1980 Canadian slasher film directed by Paul Lynch, written by William Gray, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Leslie Nielsen. The plot follows a group of high school seniors who are targeted at their prom by a mass killer seeking vengeance for the accidental death of a young girl 6 years earlier. It features supporting performances from Casey Stevens, Eddie Benton, Mary Beth Rubins, and Michael Tuff. Prom Night is a Canadian horror film over 24 days in Toronto, Ontario, Canada from August 7th to September 13th, 1979. There are not too many movies that helped shape my love for horror and slashers, specifically more than Prom Night from 1980. While this film's not exactly as well known as films like Friday the 13th and Halloween, I have distinct memories of falling in love with this movie early and watching it quite often. At a time when we did not have movies on demand or even cable television, when movies made their way on TV, you made it an event and you were glued to the screen. I did not even have a VCR at the time, so I had to watch the film when it came on, or I would miss it until the next time it was back on TV. Believe it or not, Prom Night spawned 3 sequels, none of which were similar to the original film, although Hamilton High School is the one setting that all of the Prom Night movies have in common. Brock Simpson's the only actor that's been in all 4 of the Prom Night movies. He's young Nick in the original Prom Night, Josh in Prom Night 2, Larry in Prom Night 3, The Last Kiss, and Father Colin in Prom Night 4, Deliver Us from Evil. Director Paul Lynch originally conceived the movie about a psychotic gynecologist to cash in on Halloween from 1978, but upon being told that such a movie would be distasteful, he retooled it into this movie. He drew inspiration from the classic The Town That Dreaded Sundown in 1976 by Charles B. Pierce. Lynch loved the bagged head look of the killer. Lynch grew up a poster for a fake horror movie about a killer physician titled Don't See the Doctor, and took it to Halloween producer Irwin Yablans. That's when Lynch was told to return with a concept built around a holiday of the filmmaker's choosing. Sound familiar? Halloween, Friday the 13th. Other films would follow in the early 80s to the point where almost no holiday was left without a horror movie to celebrate it. Director Paul Lynch developed Prom Night after a meeting with producer Irwin Yablans. Lynch had wanted to work on the horror movie. In response to Yablans' suggestion he utilize a holiday as a basis for the movie, Lynch decided to build the premise around the event of a high school prom. This film is also famous for one of the only slasher movies with a sympathetic killer. Both Carrie and Prom Night have revenge stories which take place at the prom, and both with a sympathetic killer who's getting revenge for a vicious prank. The main plot around 4 children committing a horrible sin and all swearing to secrecy, only to be stalked years later by a vengeful killer, would later be used as the plot for I Know What You Did Last Summer in 1997. The original version of this film was given a PG rating, but the studio was afraid no one would see a PG slasher, so they upped the violence to get this movie to an R rating. Interestingly, the first and only slasher film to be rated PG is Tourist Trap in 1979, which was released a year before this film. Ironically as well, the American remake Prom Night from 2008 became one of the few slasher films in history to be rated PG-13. Eve Plum was all set to play Kim in this film, but at the last minute Jamie Lee Curtis's people expressed an interest and Eve was replaced. I have to say that one of the main reasons I watched this film over and over again was because of Jamie Lee Curtis. This was much more artfully made than Friday the 13th, which came out the same year and was a similar holiday-themed slasher movie, riding on the coattails of Halloween, with a revenge story at its core. But for some reason, Friday the 13th was a phenomenon, and while this was a hit and it got better reviews, it did not have the same impact. According to director Paul Lynch in the documentary Going to Pieces, The Rise and Fall of the Slasher Film, he was having difficulty securing financing until Jamie Lee Curtis signed on. Once the film was shot, Paramount expressed interest in distributing the movie. However, they only wanted to open it in 300 theaters, whereas AFCO Embassy Pictures offered to release it in 1,200 theaters. AFCO Embassy released Prom Night as a result. That same year, Paramount released another independent slasher film, Friday the 13th. According to the Blu-ray commentary by director Paul Lynch, the van that goes off the cliff in the movie was actually stolen by the stunt coordinator. Composer Paul Zaza wrote all the disco songs in only 5 days. According to Paul Zaza, the prom scene was shot in actual disco hits that the production company later realized they could not afford the rights to. This gave Zaza a week and a half to create similar, original disco songs from this movie that were close, but not so close they wouldn't be sued. Speaking of disco music, Jamie Lee Curtis can dance, and was formally trained, making it hard for her dance partners to keep up. The crew had to actually use doubles for the dance scenes to keep up with her. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that Prom Night was remade in 2008. The remake was neither compelling nor scary. That's it for this episode. Make sure you like this video, make sure you share this video, make sure you subscribe, but most of all, make sure you keep it horror.